I think it's an incredible film to come out in the last 5 years.
When I watch it, I think, yeah, this is really beautiful. There's loads of really interesting things going on. But then I'm a bit like, it's not really that interesting though. And I feel it left me a little bit cold. So I'm a bit mixed about this.
I'm kind of shocked that it didn't make as many waves as possible, but I get the feeling that if it wasn't for this, we wouldn't have got Dune.
This feels like it's a bit of a man film. It's one of those that the vibes are that generally the cinema was not filled with ladies. It was very much filled with men. But I still think it's a stunning film to look at. Don't let the length put you off. Hello everybody, joining us today we have Leslie.
Hi, how you doing?
Reece.
Hello.
And as always, Kobe.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about Bladerunner 2049. Thank you as always to the mighty people for the mighty tunes, and thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at Flixwatcher Pod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello film fans, welcome to Flixwatcher Podcast. Our guests today are Leslie and Reece. Over to you please, Reece, to say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Of course, yeah, my name's Reece, also known as Rio. I am a film fanatic. I have a YouTube channel where I focus on films that I rate 4 stars and above, and then also write for a website called the Cinematography, and I have a podcast that I'm due to be starting in January, and you can find out more news on that when it comes on my Twitter account, which is at Reos Positive POV.
So you're not going to tell us anything about your podcast?
Top secret.
No, because I don't have the full information yet. It's in the works. It's something I'm messing around with ideas and jumping on different people's podcasts to get some of the good stuff. And
inspiration.
I got ideas of kind of what I want to do, maybe potentially speaking to people on a more broader scale about what they love about film, some of their favourite films, and ideally speaking to people who want to spread the word. So podcasters like yourself, YouTube people that write for websites, and just gain a greater understanding of why people love film and what makes them tick.
Fair enough. Well, guys, if you listen to this after the start of 2023, then just go to I guess you'll be on your Twitter account. You'll be able to find the details if you want to find his new podcast. Leslie, who are you?
So my name's Leslie Pitt. I've previously written for Empire and Set the Tape and Little White Lies. And I also have 2 podcasts. One is Hustlers of Culture, which is a podcast where we look at pop culture from a ethnic minority view. And the other one is Fatal Attractions, where we talk about erotic thrillers and what we love about them and hate about them.
We've had a few of your other guys from Fatal Attract Pod on here. Thank you very much for. I think you're the last one who's not been joined us yet. You're the outlier.
Possibly. Maybe Paul as well. I'm not sure.
Okay, so we need to get one more. We need to rope him into the mix. But yeah, I always find it fascinating podcasts that go down a specific genre, and yours is kind of be the most fun and also can be the most tedious, I guess, at some points as well.
You must have seen quite a lot of breasts, I imagine.
You'd be surprised on how little sex are in some of these sometimes.
How starved people were in the 90s before. Anyway, I'm not going down the route, but yeah, enjoy your podcast. But we're here to talk about the film you chose, Leslie, which is Blade Runner 2049. Can you tell us, first of all, why you chose it? And then I'll get the timer up, and you've got 60 seconds to explain what happens.
Yeah, sure. I chose it because even though its length and even though it did really flop like its predecessor, I think it's an incredible film to come out in the last 5 years. It really did feel like a calculated risk, something that they were really trying to do, and they thought it would be time to do it. And I'm kind of shocked that it didn't make as many waves as possible, but I get the feeling that if it wasn't for this, we wouldn't have got Dune.
You see, this is a stepping stone to Dune, is it?
Well, a part of me feels that way. I feel there's so many of the same people, kind of like in terms of cinematography, in terms of obviously who directs it. Ridley originally was supposed to do Dune many years ago, but then he stopped to do Bladerunner. So I just find it quite interesting just to see that kind of come from it. Whether or not this is all kind of true or just my hearsay, please write in and tell me. But I just found it quite interesting.
Let's get to the synopsis then.
Okay, so Ryan Gosling plays K, and he's a Nexus 9 replicant Blade Runner who discovers a secret that threatens to destabilize society and the course of civilization.
Love it. Okay, good. Hasn't told us anything, which is fine. We can discuss the plot.
That's probably the shortest plot summary in relation to the film length we've ever had.
All right, I think the first thing is, guys, where were we on Blade Runner, the first film, in the first place? Let's go to yourself, Reece.
Yeah, I love the original Blade Runner. Growing up, it was one of my favourite films. I've watched it countless amount of times. I won't even go into how many. I don't think I'd remember that. Knowing this movie was coming out was a big worry for me. So many years after Blade Runner, but knowing Denis was behind it made that a little bit easier for me, for sure.
Helen.
Yeah, I think it took me a couple of goes on the original Blade Runner, but it's one of the ones that I just find it really, really fascinating. And the most recent experience of it was the Secret Cinema Blade Runner, which kind of just brought it to life in a new way. And the score's amazing, and I think the costume design and the set design is really great. So yeah, big fan of the original.
Leslie, I assume you're a fan of the original too?
Yes.
I don't know why I assumed that. Don't know why.
I recently just did a kind of throwback write-up on Set the Tape on Blade Runner. And it was, I went to rewatch it when I first watched the movie many years ago. I actually had the chance to watch it at the cinema, director's cut. And I thought it was okay. Wasn't too bad. It was fine. I watched it with a then girlfriend and didn't really think too much of it at the time. And then I found myself constantly thinking about this movie over the years. And in a rewatch, I realised I probably find it possibly one of the greatest movies that Scott ever directed, if not the best. And it's possibly one of... I had the chance... I almost put it on the Sight and Sound top 10 list. I didn't, because it was already on there from last time. So I decided not to, because I think it is that strong a movie. There's something about that movie which is so potent and powerful about it, even though from a plot point it doesn't really kind of work almost.
So I think I'm going to be the outlier here and saying that I wasn't that big a fan of it.
Okay.
I think there's probably a few reasons. I think that sometimes the waste of expectations of a film is like Blade Runner. You've got to watch it. It's one of the best films in the entire world. And when I watched it, I was like, it's got Harrison Ford in it. It's quite cool.
No, I don't think the first viewing ever really does it.
Tears in the Rain, did that not move you?
I don't know what that is.
What?
I mean, the Tears in the Rain, the final dialogue, the final monologue. I think it might have been a VHS at home on my... It wasn't the 14-inch TV. It was the big family TV. But it was one of those things where I just didn't... I had maybe lofty expectations. I felt it was slower paced than I thought it was going to be, and when you got Harrison Ford in there, I was like, it's going to be like him jumping off a train. It's going to be him with a bullwhip. It's going to be him with a blaster. And I think that's the kind of thing that kind of set me down this route where it just wasn't. So I have watched it a few times, and it just didn't. It's not one of my favorite films. Look, and I can understand why it's many people's favorite films, but I enjoyed this one more. I thought this had more about it, and my God, it's beautiful, isn't it? Finally got Roger Deakins. Was this the first one?
First out of 13, yeah.
That Roger Deakins got, and he turned it up to 1 million out of 10 for this, didn't he? Just literally one of the most beautiful films ever. Still not my favourite thing ever, but I think it's just the way it's played out, the scenarios, the scenes, that bit where they're in Las Vegas, for example, with the orange Sandy hue is just something that haunts me for days when I think about it. So I wasn't one of these people who was scared like yourself, Reece, that this is going to overrun it. And we've had Denis Villeneuve in here a few times, and he smashed out the park each time. I think he's a fantastic filmmaker, so I wasn't scared. And Dune was way better than I thought it was going to be as a film. So that's why I picked up on that one there, Leslie. So Denis Villeneuve, crikey, this guy is something special, I think, as a director.
And I think that's kind of why I wanted to pick it. I mean, he's such an interesting filmmaker, and anytime he seems to do sci-fi, he really tries to. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't lead the audience on, and I think that's one of the reasons why I picked this. Is it was just something a bit. I wouldn't say cerebral. It's not really a cerebral film, but it was just a little bit more. I don't know. It wanted to do something a little bit different with sci-fi than what we were currently seeing at the time. I mean, by that point when it came out, we were kind of half drenched in Star Wars remakes and all sorts, and Marvel films and everything. And this came out and just did something a little bit different. And that, along with Arrival, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to pick it.
I mean, Arrival. We've talked about Arrival on here, and it's I don't know why I'm taking against films for being a slow burn, but Arrival was a slower paced story, more deliberately told, and that floored me, that film. What did it? Guys, if you want to listen to what I thought about Arrival, get to further down the feed and type in Arrival to find out. Reece, where are you on Denis Villeneuve and his oeuvre?
Yeah, you're talking about Arrival. I just bought a new poster. I got a poster behind me of Arrival. My pin post on my Twitter is 4 photos from Arrival. That's my favourite film of his, but overall I think he's a fantastic filmmaker. Like I said, I had worries about a sequel of Blade Runner, but when he got attached, that kind of went away. And knowing that Ridley Scott, the last time he made a classic that I love, Alien, when they come with a sequel, they smashed it out of the park as well. So I had a little bit of faith on that as well, because he built a world that you could continue, which helped massively. But no, with Denny, I'm a massive fan. Dune, that's one of my all-time favourite books. So when I found out he was directing that after seeing Arrival and Blade Runner, I was fairly excited for that one for sure.
Denis, Helen, I've heard you talk about him a couple of times here.
I think I would probably say I am a little bit more mixed than you are. Arrival is 100% my favourite film of his, absolutely. I think that's incredible. And then I really like, I haven't seen all of them, but the stuff that he's done with Jake Gyllenhaal, obviously, particularly the one where there's 2 Jake Gyllenhaals in one film. And I really like how dark Prisoners is. I struggled a little bit with Dune. I thought that was quite slow. I think rewatching this is 100% a prototype for Dune. He's basically gone, not enough people saw Blade Runner because they didn't really understand me. They didn't really understand my vision. It was too long. But now I'm Billy Big Bollocks, and everyone now loves Blade Runner because it's all over. It's all over every film Instagram sites because everyone loves it, and you all know who Anna de Armas is now. I'm just going to make it again, but I'm going to make it with Dune, and everyone's going to go and see that, and all will be forgiven. I think it's kind of mad that this was a flop because I don't think it deserved to be a flop. I'm really mixed about it. When I watch it, I think, yeah, this is really beautiful. There's loads of like really interesting things going on, but then I'm a bit like, it's not really that interesting though, and I feel it left me a little bit cold. So I'm a bit mixed about this, but 100% I'd go and see a film by him at the cinema because he's one of those guys who brings like 110%. He never does anything, and it's a bit like, oh, I just won't bother colouring in that bit. He's like 100%. Got to have like every detail. It's like, oh, did you see that thing in the right corner for 2 seconds? Like 20 people worked on that. He's that kind of dude. So even though I'm a bit in and out on this one, I admire his commitment to bringing art house vibes to mainstream movies and sci-fi.
What do you guys make of Deakins in this? Shall I throw it to you, Leslie, first?
Yeah, sure. I think he's absolutely astonishing. going back to something like Prisoners, there, if you ever get the chance to see him talk about anything like Prisoners, he lights films in a way which I don't understand. So he lights Prisoners in such a way that it looks like he's done nothing.
Yeah.
However, there's so much that he's put into it to make it look as cold as it does. That is absolutely astonishing. And I think it's the same thing here. I think the big worry for a lot of people was, well, how do you replicate that world so long afterwards? What would you do with something like Blade Runner? And I think his use of lights, it's all very, like, the neon is not the kind of neon lights that you see everywhere, like on Instagram or anything else like that. There's these really interesting uses of color, like that you brought up Las Vegas, and this is really bright orange sandstorm, and then you've got how Joy is kind of moving it around and how she's being utilized. And one of the things I love about that is, if you remember, Deakins was the visual consultant on How to Train Your Dragon.
Absolutely.
So therefore he's been looking at CGI and how that moves and utilizing light and everything else like that. So there's this interesting thing of this character that isn't fully formed, not a fully formed actual person, kind of disappearing and floating, and how he lights that and makes her kind of opaque when he needs to and transparent. And it's just astonishing, like, to see the size of lights, because there's these massive lights to kind of light up faces and whatnot. And it just puts you to shame as someone who's an amateur photographer. You wonder how he does it, and then he tells you on a podcast somewhere else, on Team Deakins. My mind's blown by it by watching it again, like, constantly, because it's just, I don't think at his age, I don't think there's anyone out there kind of hitting the heights that he's doing. I mean, there's a few, but
I mean, he does. Like I said, there's a subtlety in Prisoners, which is also difficult to replicate. But then there's there's almost like classic deco in I'm calling deco in a lot of stuff he does with the Coen brothers, for example. Like, yes. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Where it's kind of like the he's a key protagonist in digital cinematography, and he, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He presents the screen in a kind of a yellowy green hue, which is. Yeah. Again, you think I can understand. That's a deco kind of vibe. I don't know, Reece, do you want to say anything about him or the style or anything else to do with Blade Runner before?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good looking film, and Blade Runner 2049 is most certainly one of those. Deakins, for me, is the best in the game, cinematography wise. And that is pretty much all I need to say on that matter.
He's the GOAT, isn't he? That's my addition. Deco the GOAT.
It's hard. You remember as well in the original film, it's Jordan Cronworth, who was the original cinematographer, who left soon after because of illness, and his work is so good in that. And just to see how they elaborate on it, and they don't kind of take away from it. It's really interesting that the claustrophobic vibe of what you saw in the original film has changed to these kind of weird space. Everyone's gone off world, so there's this weird, odd spaces everywhere. And that first scene in this kind of weird rural farm is so kind of alien, but so familiar in its own way. It looks like the kind of stuff that Hampton Fancher was doing in the original script when he made the story of Blade Runner. It's just fascinating, and just how he blocks the characters together and everything is just so, I don't know, it's so simple yet so effective. He's just got this really interesting use of space. If you see a Coen Brothers comedy, you realise how close you are to the camera and how he utilises space that way. But if you see this, it's just this big, expansive thing, and it's only part of us. It's like one small part of a larger world, and I don't know. It just seems vast. How do you do that?
I mean, I'd like just to talk about that first scene. From the start, there's more action in this than there was in the original Blade Runner, right? And I think that kind of hooks people in or not, or sends them down a route. But I thought that was fantastic. And the cast of characters in this is phenomenal, from well-known people. Obviously, you've got Harrison Ford there, your man who played the Joker, whose name I can't remember right now, for some reason.
Jared Leto.
Yes. Armas and David Dastmalchian.
Robin Wright.
Yeah. Robin Wright. Oh, one of my favourites. Dastmalchian, who's, I think, in a lot of Denis Villeneuve films.
Unfortunately, Jared Leto.
Yeah, that's what Reece said.
He's not the worst in it, though, considering.
No,
I actually don't think he's bad in it. I'm not the biggest Jared Leto hater. I don't think he's that bad. I think it's turned into I think people go in and hate him more before even watching the film nowadays.
It could have been David Bowie, apparently. He was wanted for the role and then he died, so sadly couldn't do that.
That would have been way better.
But there is a bit of a Jared Leto pile-on. I think justified in some cases.
Yeah, I do think there are certain films that he's atrocious in. I haven't even watched Morbius yet, and I won't watch it. But no, I don't think he's too bad.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's to do with his actions behind the scenes whilst playing Joker in the Suicide Squad and stuff that's turned people off him.
Awful performances. This one's fine. I think this one's fine. It's a bit weird. I think he probably plays like being weird slightly more than anyone else. Everyone else is a little bit more natural. But yeah, he's fine. I was being mean to him because he's an easy target.
Let's talk about Harrison Ford. Was anyone under any illusion when you watched this for the first time that Harrison Ford as Deckard wasn't going to show up in this film? Was it even in... Did they try and hint that he wasn't going to be in it, or what was going on there?
It takes a bloody long time to show up, I'll tell you that.
I think it's difficult because it's... How can I say it? It's everything depends on how you felt about Deckard and what cut you saw of the original film and what you think if he's a replicant or not, and if he is a replicant, what's he doing here? If he isn't a replicant, then it makes a little bit more sense.
I think this is part of my reason why the first one left me cold, because people talk about the different cuts you'd see to get the different experiences, and then each time I'm like,
just final cut. That's fine. It's just okay. Just find that final cut, and it's all right.
I would have been okay without him. I don't know. I just felt that they'd gone so far into doing something slightly a bit different and going down a slightly different route that I was just a bit like, could just left it, not been in it. Grumpy old Harrison doesn't really look like he wants to be there.
That's Harrison most films now.
Yeah. He just does grumpy.
Yeah.
Does moody or grumpy.
There's no problem with him being in it. I just don't feel like he added too much to the story itself, and probably didn't need to be there. It's a nostalgia thing, really. I don't think if he was not in the film, it wouldn't be as great as it is. But I think people obviously enjoy seeing him back in it for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was a friendly face. Is in some decent sequences, and ultimately that's his daughter that he sees at the end. However, that's kind of constructed in the film and in your minds, then it's quite a nice touch, I thought, to finish it that way. Should we head to the scores, guys?
Hello, I'm Hannah Flint from the First Film Club, a film podcast series dedicated to established and emerging talent, both in front of and behind the camera, and the feature debuts that launch their careers. From the new drama Mass to the cult classic Heathers, each episode is dedicated to a film, a guest, and the behind-the-scenes stories, memories, and advice from their time on set. Find us, the First Film Club, wherever you listen to your stripped media podcasts. Come join the club.
Welcome to the Flixwatcher scores. Your scores are out of 5 and you can have decimal places if you wish. And we'll start with you, please, Leslie, with your recommendability.
So I would recommend this 4. I recommended Blade Runner to my wife, the original Blade Runner to my wife, who hated it. Absolutely despised it. Just didn't get on with it at all. Didn't get wrapped up into the world building. While I'm in tears, looking at Rutger Hauer and Tears in the Rain and whatnot, which is fine. But it is a film that if you are into that world, into that kind of world building, it's easy to recommend the second film. I think there's a lot to gain out of it. If you're not into that world, and if you're not into that sci-fi, I think it's actually very difficult and quite hard to penetrate.
Reece?
I'd give it a 3.5. I always find it hard to recommend sequels to films. It means you've got to recommend someone watch 2 films, and it's hard to get someone to watch 2 films in a row. And also, with it being sci-fi and stuff like that, it's not going to be to everyone's taste. As brilliant as it is, I think you need to know you're recommending it to. But because it's a sequel is the main reason why I'd give it a 3.5.
Helen?
So to recommend this, I would say, have you got 2 hours and 43 minutes? Because if you haven't, then you can't watch this. Did you like Dune? Are you super excited for the second one? And did you like Bladerunner? And if you answer that yes, then 100% this is for you. This feels like it's a bit of a man film. It's one of those that the vibes are that generally the cinema was not filled with ladies. It was very much filled with men, which sci-fi generally I think can be a bit balanced, but definitely with this, it was definitely on that. But I still think it's a stunning film to look at, and don't let the length put you off that much. So I'm going to give it a 4.
I think it is a kind of a grouchy, I don't know, maybe not grouchy man's film, but it is definitely like it just kind of paints itself down that route, doesn't it? I can imagine when you went to cinema, it was like lots of single men kind of dotted around the cinema. I was one of those single men dotted around the cinema.
the character of Joy as well is a bit kind of like stereotype male AI fantasy type thing. So it is a bit like that as well. That's
100%.
I thought she had a better role than I remember. At first, I remember just her being like naked, but she wasn't that much. But she drove Kay's character quite a lot more than I remember on this rewatch. But there were certain tropes definitely there that were not as great as it could be. But Ana de Armas, I think, is genuinely one of the best screen presences we've got at the moment. So her appearance in James Bond, in The Grey Man, in Knives Out.
Knock knock.
It's just like, is that the Keanu Reeves one?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not seeing that, but yeah, I think she's a fantastic screen presence. I haven't seen Blonde yet, but yeah, I think she's great. Don't bother. That's kind of what I've heard.
I watched it in the cinema when it came out. 3 hours I won't get back in my life.
I mean, it's interesting that you guys brought up the tropes, because obviously the tropes in the original film were harsher, especially as the fact that it was taken from more of a neo-noir than anything else. So you do have these things on where a lot of the women in there aren't portrayed in the greatest light. And I think it did have a little bit of a struggle, because it's a completely different world to look at now. And at least in the original film, you could turn around and go, oh yeah, well, it was the 80s and et cetera, and possibly excuse it. Whereas now in 2017, it just seemed very difficult. However, I think I do agree that the fact that Ana de Armas playing Joy, I think if it wasn't for her presence, if it was played by anyone else, I don't think it would have been as strong. I think those tropes would have been even more prominent.
So I'm going to go for 4. I think you need to watch the first Blade Runner to have seen this, and if you haven't, then what are you doing? But it's kind of weird if you've seen the first Blade Runner, then you'll be aware of this one already. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where they'll know about this film and you just go and watch it. If you like the first one, if you didn't like the first one, then if you hated the first one, then don't bother.
Well, you might like this one though. That's the thing. I think some people like you didn't like the first one, but really like this one because it just brought something different to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I say you don't like, if there's people who like Leslie's wife, for example, who just took against the whole world building side of things, and for me, I was kind of intrigued, but I just didn't get why it was lots of people's favorite films. So I was intrigued to take a second stab, and this got me a lot more than the first one. There's a bit more action. I thought it was prettier, and I think there's a nice kind of central story which I don't think I really cared about in the first one. And also, hey, Ryan Gosling, I like him.
Oh, you were not mentioning, have we? Sorry, Ryan.
But Ryan's a good actor. We talked about him on The Grey Man. He's been in La La Land. It's a bit more like quietly. He's not a big bombastic guy, is he? I'm quite surprised I haven't seen him in any Marvel films, for example, or any superhero films. But also at the same time,
he's underrated because he's understated.
He's got some great screen presence appearances. I still love. My God, my head's not working today, guys.
Crazy
Nice
Stupid
Guys
Love,
and Drive
Manchester by the Sea.
No.
Oh yeah, The Nice Guys
Gangster
is great.
Squad.
Yeah, Crazy Stupid Love. I think it's an amazing rom-com, and he's the main drive. Him and Steve Carell going toe to toe is one of my favorite cinematic bits. It's a film I've seen more often than I would have anticipated just by the title of it, and that's a lot due to him. Sorry, yes. Repeat viewing score, Leslie.
I'm going to go a bit low with this, and I'd say 3. And I think the reason why is because it is the length. I think more people. We've got a TV show coming up soon, I guess, Bladerunner 2099, and I think people will probably get into that a little bit more than trying to watch a whole film again, which is almost 3 hours. It's just hard. It's difficult to get people to watch films at this length if it's not, I don't know, Endgame or anything like that. So I can't. It's hard. I can't imagine it being so repeatable. But I did enjoy this repeat viewing.
Is this the second time you've seen it?
Yeah, second time I saw it.
Reece.
I don't know about for everyone else, but for me, it's definitely rewatchable. The only problem for me is I'll watch the first one and then the second one, one after the other. So you need a spare 5-6 hours.
It's commitment.
Anytime there's 2 films in a series, and they're related directly, I have to watch the first one before watching the second one. That's just a rule that I set myself. If it's 3-4 films in a series, then I'll pick one out here or there. But based on that, I'd probably go over 4, but I've rewatched this one multiple times as well.
So Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Kill Bill, it's you got to do the 1-2 punch every single time.
Yeah, normally that's the case. I've watched Kill Bill 1 a lot more than Kill Bill 2. Because it's the first film in the series, I'll have to watch it. And also because it's not, the timeline's all over the place, it kind of works out a little bit different in that one. But the long version, the one that's both of them put together, now that's an awesome film.
Oh, is it? Okay, I've never seen that. Helen, repeat viewing score.
So quite similar to you, Leslie. I never would have watched this again unless you'd picked it, just because it's it's quite long, and I don't know. But I did enjoy watching it again. I was a little bit reluctant at the start, and then actually I did quite get into it. So, but I'm probably not going to watch it again. So yeah, 3.
I'm going to go for 3.2. It definitely bears watching again. The length is a bit off-putting. And when I pressed play on it and the length of time came up on Netflix, I was like,
big on bar. And you pause it and it's like there's still that much. And you're like, it's not moved along, is it?
I'm either going to fall asleep or I'm not going to finish watching it tonight. And I had to split across a few nights, unfortunately. But otherwise, yeah, I'm glad I watched it again. I was looking forward to watching it again, and I'm glad I did. So thanks for picking it. 3.1 small screen score. I think this is going to lose a few points here. Leslie.
Yeah, it's 3 again, isn't it? It needs to be watched on a bigger screen. I watched it at the cinema and then watched it here. I wouldn't say you lose something, but there was something about sitting in row 5 of a cinema and just letting that thing wash over you, which was someone else. And I don't think it hits as well here. Although the ending in the sea or
the steps.
The climax, in the water with Harrison Ford and the other replicant. I can't remember her name. She's called Love. That's it. And the fight sequence there is still really, really effective. Really, really good.
That whole kind of final, I'm not even sure it's a final act, is it? But that final kind of 20 minutes was a wave of emotions. It went from drownings through to meeting your long lost daughter and Ryan Gosling maybe dying on the step in the snow. Reece, small screen score.
3.5, just solely because of how bloody good that film is in the cinema. It still looks good. I've got the 4K. It still looks good. But yeah, no, in the cinema, that film is just unreal. Deakins' cinematography comes to the forefront when you're watching that one in the cinema. And giving it a 3.5 feels like a low score because of how good it looks. But it just, you need to see, I'm a big cinema advocate. If I could watch everything in the cinema, I would. And Blade Runner 2049 is most definitely one that if you ever can see in the cinema, go check it out because it just brings it to a completely different level.
Helen.
Yeah, I find it insane that it was a flop because if there was any one time you were going to go and see this, then it was at the cinema. Like, I just remember, like, for the orangey bits, like the whole cinema was orange, and like for the neon bits, like the whole cinema was neon. It was just like, whoa, like, you know, this is like magic, cinema magic. And it's got that classic Zimmer score, hasn't it, with the stuff going on. I think I prefer Vangelis, but yeah, it is one for the cinema. So where am I? 3.5. Go on.
You guys are all gone a bit higher than I thought you would do. I'm going to go for 2.5. I think it's magnificent in the cinema. This still does look good and is effective on the smaller screen. But for the orangey bits alone, for the snowy bits alone, for the neon bits alone, for whichever bits, even just like the shots of the kind of grubs on the table at the start of the first scene that just before the fight happens. Even that kind of thing is like, this looks great. This looks amazing. 2.5 engagement score. Leslie.
I would say for me 4. I was really into it again. And I think most films, if not all films, need a second watch. And you just pick up on these little things that just makes it a little bit more entertaining. I liked the little interplay between kind of Mackenzie Davis's character and Ana de Armas's character.
Another person we haven't talked about.
Yeah. And I thought that was just something that I completely forgot and missed before. And all these little bits of character building just really worked. And the cameo from Amos as well was just perfect. Like, such a small, simple scene, but really effectively done. And I think it just, because I watched Blade Runner recently, again, watching this now, just brought back all that kind of feeling and that element in there. So I was really engaged.
Reece?
Yeah, for me, it's 5. I don't really turn off any movie once I start it. It might be hard after watching Blade Runner first and then this. I might fall asleep, but I wouldn't turn it off myself personally.
Does that count?
I may unintentionally, I may turn it off by falling asleep, but that'll only be in the morning when I wake up. So no, as soon as I start watching something, I'll follow through. So I'll give it a 5.
One of our early guests had a concept of the napper, where it's kind of film you put on if you're feeling like if you fall asleep whilst it's on, that's not a problem. I'm not sure this is that, but I do I do quite like that concept. Helen.
Oh, this is definitely a napper film, like, and I think the first one is as well. I don't know. I think it's just something about like the darkness and the rain and like the oranginess is quite like sleepy. So I think if you have a nap in this, like, you'll probably wake up and it'll still be going. So I think that's fine.
But do you not feel you've missed out on some of the story though with the napping? I think the kind of nap is like you wake up at any point, you know what's going on, and it doesn't matter. But that's my interpretation. Obviously, it could be a different.
Any Dwayne Johnson film.
I try not to fall asleep in the cinema anymore because it's too expensive. I'm going to give it a solid 4 for engagement. I think if I was the editor, I would have been a bit leaner with some of the cuts and could be like a little bit, leaner, especially because obviously I've seen it before, so 4.
I'd like it if it was like you can have your own edits after the first watch. Can I have a longer cut, please?
I can do Premiere Pro. I can do some dissolve editing.
I don't think Deco would allow dissolve editing at any point in any of his films ever. 3.9. It kept me engaged, and that kind of running length, you need to be involved in it. And I think there's mainly driven by the cinematography, because I was just happy to see everything. Even, there's that scene in Vegas where Kay and Deckard just realise Kay's been tracked, and the flying car shoots down the window, and the car comes into the room and turns around. I was just like, whoa, that scene was brilliant. I just loved that scene, and it's, I don't know what I'm saying, but I loved it. So, but things like that had me hooked in at every 5 minutes. There's something that hooked me in, and and that gives us an overall score of 3.62500.
That small screen score.
It's a small screen score, and repeat viewing score, but high recommendability and engagement overall. Should we head to Twitter?
Yay!
Okay, guys, if you're listening to us, do follow us on Twitter. We are at Flixwatcher Pod on Twitter. Do follow us because we put some tweets out telling you what to watch on Netflix in general. But also, before we go to record, we ask for your opinions and put out a tweet like this. We're reviewing Bladerunner 2049 with Afro Film Viewer and from Fatal Trap Pod and Reos Positive POV. Have you seen it? Tells your thoughts and the score out of 5 stars for a shout out on our podcast. Leslie, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to go with David Trumbull. He said the original Blade Runner is a 3-star film with a 5-star final act, making it a 4-star. Blade Runner 2049 has a 3-star story with 5-star visuals and atmosphere, also bumping it up to a 4-star. In that way, it's a totally appropriate successor to its forebear, 4 stars.
Fair play. Reece?
Emily says, I love Blade Runner 2049, an example of a film which is very slow but completely captivates me. I adore the atmosphere, the colours, the cinematography, the music, and I'm a big fan of the actors. I find a relationship between Ryan and Anna very moving too. For me, it's a 4.5-star film.
Lovely. Helen?
So I'm going to take this, well, we've kind of got, it's like a 3-parter here, but it's from Lean H. Dempsey, previous guest of the show. Grossly long in comparison with the under 2 hours original, plus no real reason for being, but well made and acted, apart from Jared Leto. Far better than it could have been, but the idea of it being on the same level, or even better than the groundbreaking first film, is utter madness. When pressed for how many stars, I think probably 3.5 stars, but I resent giving them.
And then Leslie pipes in, please watch again.
And then he sort of says, like, I don't even dislike it, just people trying to even compare it to the original is abysmal to me. There's a couple more comments, so if you want to maybe agree or disagree with Liam and read the full conversation, then please do. But I find it amusing that he resented giving it 3.5 stars.
Leslie, do you want to say the last one?
So KDS Virgil, which is beautiful, memorable, thought-provoking, hypnotically paced, not afraid to take its time and rewards the viewer for their investment. Bleak and yet not without hope. Great score and sound design. My favourite Villeneuve film. And he gets pressed for stars and he says 5 stars.
Lovely. Leslie and Reece, can you sign off by telling everyone where we can find you online and say goodbye to the listeners?
Yeah, so I'm Afro Film Viewer, pretty much everywhere on the internet. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, that's where you'll find me. You can also find me on Fatal Attract Pod, which is Fatal Attract's podcast, and Culture Hustlers, which is the Hustlers of Culture podcast.
And Reece?
Yeah, my Twitter is at Reos Positive POV. That's REOS Positive POV, and on there's a link tree link which can bring you to the website I write for, my YouTube channel, and all the other jargon. Maybe it might be a new social media in a couple of days, who knows? But that's where you can find me for everything. And also, I guess your podcast will be linked there as well whenever that launches. Indeed, if you guys listen to it in the new year. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. It's been a pleasure to revisit this, and we'll say goodbye to all your listeners. Bye. Thanks so much for coming on. Goodbye. See ya. Bye. Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.